Have you ever felt like an actor on a stage, playing a role that doesn't quite fit? Does the person you present to the world feel like a carefully constructed facade, a performance for an audience you never chose? Perhaps you catch your reflection and, for a fleeting, unsettling moment, you don't recognize the stranger staring back. Or maybe you spend your days navigating a maze of obligations, forcing smiles, firing off automated responses, insisting everything is fine, while inside, a quiet earthquake of discontent is slowly, inexorably leveling your inner landscape. If this resonates, then listen closely, for you are not alone, nor are you descending into madness. You are, in fact, awakening. Franz Kafka wasn't crafting escapist fantasies. He was dissecting the very essence of modern alienation, the unspoken anguish of those who exist without understanding why. His characters aren't merely ill or misguided. They are reflections of ourselves, raw and unflinchingly honest portrayals of human beings crushed by a world that demands answers but offers only an echoing silence in return. Kafka doesn't offer comforting platitudes. He provides a mirror, a distorted one, perhaps, but only because the reality it reflects is already warped beyond recognition. He writes of men transformed into grotesque insects, of bureaucracies that suffocate with senseless rules, of castles forever beyond reach. But at the heart of these surreal narratives lies a profound and unsettling truth. You are not who you think you are, and this realization, if you possess the courage to embrace it, can be the catalyst for everything. The truth, stark and undeniable, is this: your identity, your meticulously crafted routine, your ambitious plans, your cherished certainties. Perhaps all of this has been painstakingly constructed as a defense mechanism, a shield against the agonizing void of not knowing your true self. But suppressing that ache of uncertainty will not make it vanish. It will only drive it deeper, where it festers until it explodes, as it did within Kafka and countless others who awakened too soon to the realization that the life they were living was not their own. So, I implore you, how many more dawns will break before you refuse to live as someone else? Kafka famously wrote, "Beyond a certain point, there is no return. This is the precipice you must reach. And perhaps, just perhaps, that point is now." Consider Gregor Samsa. When he wakes to find himself transformed into a monstrous insect, his first reaction isn't horror, disbelief, or a desperate plea for explanation. He worries about being late for work. Pause for a moment and absorb the chilling implications of that. This is the Kafkaesque tragedy in its purest form. The outlandish transformation of the body pales in comparison to the relentless pressure to remain productive within a system that is utterly indifferent to your individual worth. Kafka exposes dehumanization with surgical precision. In the Metamorphosis, the Trial, and the Castle, he doesn't offer convenient villains or reassuring resolutions. He plunges us into labyrinthine dead ends, where the individual is relentlessly crushed by invisible, impersonal forces, and where suffering stems not from malice, but from the cold, uncaring indifference of the world. Joseph K., the protagonist of The Trial, is accused of a crime he never committed, a crime that is never even defined. He is subjected to investigation, judgment, and ultimate condemnation, yet the nature of his transgression remains shrouded in mystery. This may seem ludicrous, yet consider this. How often have you felt judged, criticized, or ostracized without understanding the reason why? How many times have you carried the weight of guilt, shame, or fear without being able to pinpoint its origin? Kafka doesn't invent characters. He peels back the layers to reveal what lies beneath the carefully constructed masks we all wear. He exposes the disintegration of identity when confronted with a world that demands unquestioning obedience, soulless conformity, and a performance of success devoid of genuine authenticity. And the most disturbing aspect of all, these characters persist in their futile attempts to fit in, even as the very fabric of their existence unravels around them. This is where Kafka touches upon a profound psychological and existential truth. Human beings often cling to the familiar pain of routine rather than embrace the terrifying uncertainty of freedom. We desperately maintain the illusion that we know who we are, that we are in control, that we are on the right path, rather than confront the abyss of a question that many avoid throughout their entire lives. What if I am, at my core, nobody? But here lies the paradox, the turning point. It is precisely within this collapse, within this unsettling emptiness, within this terrifying state of not knowing, that something new, something authentic, can begin to emerge. Because sometimes, to discover who you truly are, you must first witness the complete and utter disintegration of who you thought you were. In the next section, we will delve into the psychological labyrinth that Kafka so presciently foresaw and that we now know as modern life. Brace yourself to confront the uncomfortable truth of seeing your own reflection in its darkest corners. You awaken, ingest caffeine, compulsively check your phone, respond to messages you'd rather ignore, drag yourself to a job that drains your soul, engage in superficial conversations with people you barely know, force a smile out of sheer obligation, return home exhausted, and repeat the entire charade the following day. They call this living, but what if it's merely a carefully constructed disguise, a script thrust upon you before you even possessed the capacity for conscious choice? Kafka saw this insidious trap long before the advent of social media, burnout culture, and the tyranny of toxic positivity. He perfectly captured the essence of what so many of us experience today, the persistent feeling of being trapped within a system that compels us to function, but never truly allows us to live. In The Castle, the protagonist strives desperately to gain access to a place that symbolizes power, acceptance, and validation. He seeks to be recognized, to understand the rules, to find his place within the established order. But the castle remains eternally elusive, forever on the periphery, always just out of reach, a cruel and potent metaphor for the modern pursuit of external validation, social status, and a sense of purpose that feels increasingly unattainable. The Kafkaesque labyrinth is constructed from absurd regulations, deliberately ambiguous language, and empty promises that are never fulfilled. But the most insidious aspect is that this labyrinth becomes internalized. Gradually, you begin to blame yourself for your inability to navigate its treacherous paths, the unrelenting pressure to be productive, happy, desirable, intelligent, and spiritually enlightened transforms into a relentless cycle of self-criticism and judgment. And what remains of your authentic self amidst this relentless onslaught? This is where psychology enters the narrative. Carl Jung would label this an inflated persona, the carefully crafted social mask we wear to gain acceptance. But when this persona becomes the totality of your being, when your very essence is contorted to fit into a predetermined mold, the inevitable symptoms emerge: crippling anxiety, pervasive apathy, a profound sense of emptiness, debilitating insomnia, and a full-blown identity crisis. The soul begins to scream in silent agony while you continue to plaster a forced smile on your face for the benefit of the outside world. Kafka doesn't offer a quick fix, a magical cure-all, but he provides something far more valuable: clarity. He reveals that the labyrinth isn't merely an external construct. It exists within you, woven into the very fabric of your being. And only when you recognize this internal landscape can you begin to chart a course towards liberation. But be warned, escaping the labyrinth requires relinquishing everything you once believed yourself to be, and that process can be excruciatingly painful. It feels like a symbolic death. The question then is this: are you willing to let the false self die, to relinquish the illusion of control, in order to perhaps, just perhaps, be reborn into the person you were always meant to be? In the next section, we will explore what happens when this internal labyrinth closes in completely, and the feeling of alienation becomes all-consuming. What course of action do you take when you no longer recognize yourself, nor the world that surrounds you? We will examine Kafkaesque loneliness, the profound isolation that stems not from the absence of human contact, but from the absence of self. You can be surrounded by a multitude of people, diligently meeting every expectation, living precisely as you were instructed to live, and still feel as though you're floating in a void, utterly disconnected from reality. It's a peculiar, almost indescribable sensation, as if there were an invisible barrier separating you from the world. You observe everything, participate in every activity, yet feel nothing. You are physically present, but spiritually absent. Kafka understood this feeling with a chilling degree of precision. He lived it. His entire life was characterized by a profound sense of disconnection from the world around him. He wrote during the silent, solitary hours of the early morning. He was an obsessive observer of human existence, yet always remained on the periphery, never fully integrated. For him, living felt like being trapped in a body that never truly belonged, existing in a time that never quite made sense, surrounded by voices that didn't listen and faces that didn't truly see. This alienation transcends mere loneliness. It is profoundly existential. It corrodes the soul slowly and relentlessly. It begins with a subtle unease, a nagging feeling of inadequacy. Then it morphs into chronic boredom, emotional detachment, and an overwhelming weariness of your own existence. You begin to avoid certain conversations because you know that your thoughts and feelings would be incomprehensible to others. You cease sharing your innermost emotions because you anticipate the emptiness of their response. Gradually, you begin to fade from view. And the most tragic aspect is that no one notices, because on the surface, everything appears normal. Kafka doesn't romanticize this debilitating pain. He exposes it in all its raw, unflinching ugliness. His characters are surrounded by figures that appear outwardly human, yet are emotionally cold, mechanical, and devoid of empathy. They are perfect reflections of a society that demands relentless performance, but offers no genuine connection in return. They plead for meaning, but are met with an echoing silence. They seek justice, only to find doors slammed shut in their faces. They yearn to be seen, but are systematically ignored. This is Kafkaesque loneliness, existing within the world without ever truly being a part of it. And perhaps you are experiencing this precise reality right now. Perhaps you are watching this video in a desperate attempt to find some echo, some affirmation that you are not entirely alone in this desolate void. And if that is the case, listen carefully. The alienation you feel is not a personal flaw. It is a symptom of profound clarity. It is a sign that you still possess the capacity to feel, something that most have long since numbed into oblivion. But there is a danger lurking here, because when alienation persists unchecked, it not only distances you from the world, it begins to pull you away from your own self. You forget your passions, your values, your deepest desires. Your identity begins to dissolve, leaving behind only a faint shadow of who you once were. And it is at this critical juncture that many succumb to despair. But it is also at this point that some experience a profound awakening. In the next section, we will discuss precisely this: what to do when the mind begins to scream for help, how to navigate the nameless anguish that consumes you from within. Kafka doesn't provide simple solutions, but he illuminates potential pathways. And perhaps within this seemingly inescapable labyrinth, pain is the only thread that can guide you back to yourself. The mind doesn't collapse instantaneously. It cracks and crumbles piece by piece. First comes the fatigue, not merely physical, but profoundly existential. Simply waking up feels like a monumental struggle. Dragging yourself out of bed requires an almost Herculean effort. Time begins to lose its vibrancy, and days devolve into meaningless repetitions. You continue to move through the motions, diligently fulfilling your obligations, but internally, everything feels suspended, distant, uninhabited. Kafka was intimately familiar with this agony. He suffered from chronic insomnia, debilitating anxiety, and terrifying panic attacks long before these conditions were properly understood or diagnosed. But he transformed his suffering into language, and language into a mirror. His stories transcend mere literature. They are profound diagnoses of the human condition. Each character is a symbolic representation of a particular psychic state. Each setting is a metaphor for a suffering that, at the time, was largely invisible. Today, modern psychology would label this existential depression, ego collapse, or an identity crisis. Kafka simply called it living. The silent pain that permeates the lines of his texts is the same pain that inhabits so many of us today. And the cruelest irony of all, words fail to adequately capture the experience. You say, "I'm tired," when in reality, you are exhausted from the sheer act of existing. You say, "Everything's fine," when in reality, you feel as though you are silently disintegrating from the inside out. And because no one else can perceive your inner turmoil, you begin to doubt your own pain. You start to question yourself. Am I weak? Is this all just in my head? No, it is not weakness. It is a calling. The pain that Kafka describes is not an error, a malfunction. It is a signal. It emerges when you have strayed too far from your authentic self, when you are living a life that is fundamentally incompatible with your soul, when you have silenced your inner voice for so long that your psyche begins to scream in protest. It's as if your unconscious is saying, "Either you stop, or I will stop you." And this scream can manifest in the form of debilitating anxiety attacks, terrifying panic attacks, profound depersonalization, or a desperate desire to simply vanish. And as frightening as it may seem, this very suffering is what can ultimately save you. Because pain, when listened to with unwavering attention, transforms into a compass, guiding you back to your true north. Deep anguish, when embraced without judgment, becomes a portal, leading you to a new dimension of understanding. It is precisely within this collapse that something new can begin to emerge, not merely a new version of you, to borrow from the language of self-help, but something far more profound, the beginning of a journey back to who you were before you forgot. Kafka never offered facile relief, he offered mirrors. But every true mirror possesses the power to awaken. The question is this: are you willing to look with unflinching honesty, to confront what resides within you and that you have spent years diligently ignoring? In the next section, we will explore one of Kafka's most symbolic works, the Metamorphosis, as an archetypal narrative for this very process of pain and rebirth. We will understand why it is sometimes necessary to transform into a monstrous insect before you can truly become human. Gregor Samsa awakens to the horrifying realization that he has transformed into an insect. It is one of the most impactful opening lines in all of literature, but what is its true meaning? Kafka never explains the cause of Gregor's transformation. There is no curse, no accident, no discernible physical explanation. And it is precisely here that the power of the metaphor resides. Gregor's transformation is not literal, it is profoundly psychic. It is the grotesque materialization of an internal collapse that many of us experience in silence. The moment when the carefully constructed persona shatters and what was once hidden finally emerges into the light. For years, Gregor dutifully supported his family, suppressing his own desires and surrendering his own will. He was the obedient son, the exemplary employee, the quintessential good boy. But beneath the surface, there existed a simmering cauldron of frustration, anguish, and resentment. His existence was a continuous act of self-sacrifice performed in the name of a love that was never truly reciprocated. When he awakens, transformed, it is not his body that has undergone the metamorphosis. It is his soul that has finally screamed louder than the mask he wore. At this juncture, Kafka's metaphor connects deeply with Jungian psychology. Carl Jung termed this process the emergence of the shadow, the moment when everything that has been repressed, denied, or forgotten within the unconscious returns with irresistible force. And this return is never graceful. It manifests in the form of crisis, collapse, and a loss of control. The monster that Gregor becomes is the embodiment of everything he tried to conceal from himself in order to gain acceptance. But beware, this monstrous form is not an enemy, it is a messenger. It carries the unvarnished truth that you have stubbornly refused to hear. It represents the ultimate price of living a life that is not authentically yours. And that is precisely why metamorphosis, as agonizing as it may be, can be a process of profound symbolic healing. Because only when you confront what you fear most within yourself can you begin to find liberation. Kafka compels us to confront what we desperately seek to avoid. And that is precisely why so many people reject his works. Not because they are intellectually challenging, but because they function as unflattering mirrors. And what we see reflected within them is not a pleasant sight. Our own apathy, our own conformity, our own cowardice in the face of saying no. How many times have you hidden behind the veil of obligation? How many times have you suppressed your true feelings in order to maintain a false sense of peace? How many times have you ceased truly living in order to fulfill the expectations of others? Gregor ultimately dies alone, rejected, and forgotten. But his death is not merely a tragedy, it is a liberation. Because the true nightmare was not the metamorphosis itself, it was the life he led before it. The insect was not a punishment, it was a revelation. Now, the crucial question that remains is this: are you also undergoing a metamorphosis without even realizing it? Is your current crisis, in fact, a brutal but ultimately compassionate invitation from life to reinvent yourself, to reclaim your authentic being? In the final section of this video, we will tie everything together with a concluding reflection. The collapse of identity can be terrifying, but it can also be profoundly liberating. We will explore how accepting that you are not who you thought you were can paradoxically be the first step toward finally living a life of truth and authenticity. It requires immense courage to deconstruct one's own identity. Most individuals spend their entire lives clinging to a false image of themselves, meticulously constructed from the expectations of others, unresolved childhood traumas, and the carefully defined social roles they have learned to perform. But inevitably, there arrives a moment when the mask begins to crack, and that is when many succumb to panic, desperately attempting to glue the shattered pieces back together, frantically trying to revert to something they were never truly meant to be. Kafka teaches us that this rupture, regardless of how excruciating it may seem, is absolutely necessary. Because you are not defined by your profession, you are not defined by the projections of your parents, you are not defined by your meticulously curated social media presence, nor by the role you assumed in order to survive. All of these constructs may have served a purpose at some point in your life. They may have provided protection, instilled a sense of belonging, or helped you to navigate a challenging world. But now, they are suffocating you. You feel it deep within your soul. You know with unwavering certainty that the version of you that the world applauds is slowly killing the version of you that is true. Franz Kafka did not write to entertain. He wrote to expose, to illuminate the darkest recesses of the human soul, to remind us that life is a process of constant detachment, of perpetually shedding the skins that no longer fit. You will inevitably be forced to let go of ideas, images, and identities that no longer serve you. And yes, it will hurt, it will feel like a profound loss. But within this period of mourning, there exists a rare and precious opportunity, the chance to be reborn. The question you must ask yourself now is not, who am I? But rather, who would I be if I possessed the courage to abandon everything I have been told I am? Do not wait for the world to grant you permission to ask this question. It will never grant it, because an awakened human being, one who is lucid, aware of their own inherent emptiness, and simultaneously aware of their boundless potential, is far too dangerous to the established order. They do not conform, they do not blindly obey, they forge their own paths. So, if this video has resonated with you, if at any moment you have felt touched, seen, or deeply moved by these words, I urge you to comment down below. I am in process. Because recognizing that you are in transition, that you are falling apart in order to rebuild yourself on a foundation of authenticity, is the first act of honesty with your own soul. And you can be certain that you are not alone in this journey. And before you depart, keep watching. The next video is important, perhaps even more so than you currently imagine. I'll see you there. So, if any of this has resonated with you, remember, feeling like an actor in your own life isn't a sign of failure, but a signal. A powerful invitation to dismantle the false self and begin the courageous journey toward authenticity. It's about stripping away the layers of conditioning and expectation to reveal the true, unvarnished you. It's a lifelong process, and it requires immense courage, especially in a world that often prioritizes conformity over conscious living. If this journey towards cognitive clarity and discovering your authentic self is something you're grappling with, I'd absolutely love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, ask a question, or simply connect with others who are also navigating this path. What's the biggest obstacle you face in pursuing your own truth, and what mental health tools are you using to overcome it? And if you found this helpful and want to explore more neuroscience content and AI philosophy of self that helps to dismantle old models and create a real understanding of what authentic identity is, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you'll be part of a community committed to self-optimization and won't miss out on future videos that delve deeper into these crucial topics. Let's embark on this journey together, one brave step at a time.